students on campus here are people that are living in the urban settings, and when they go out of the campus, they are actually working with brands to sell it to people that are mostly in the urban areas. But when you go to the rural areas, you understand problems from a very grassroots level.
There's a huge disconnect between what is taught and what is the real life and the real world. And rural immersions, according to me, is a perfect way to bridge that gap or give you an effort in bridging that gap. As we become future marketers and future leaders, we are sensitized to that aspect of one-to-one interactions rather than treating people as test cases or case studies.
If we relate to our real life experiences, rural doesn't come anywhere near to that. So if we don't know 70% of India, then we are not a marketer.
The Adani Foundation is the CSR wing of Adani Group. Before we had gone for our immersion, we had a briefing with the stakeholders where we were told that there are a lot of income generation activities happening which are empowering the villagers in the places where Adani Foundation is. Once we had arrived at Tiroda, we were briefed about the details of the project, which involved 3 to 4 income generating activities done majorly by the women of the village. The first one was agarbatti making, the second was lakh bangle making, the third was mushroom cultivation, and the fourth, which was crossbreeding of cows. The main motive of all these 3 or 4 activities was to empower the women of these villages and to increase the livelihood so as to increase the quality of life.
So for the same, we conducted in-depth interviews in 7 villages where we interviewed the women that were engaged in these activities.
So though they were engaging in those activities, producing superb products, but they didn't have demand in the immediate vicinity, nor did they have a market for them to sell those products. So that's why they wanted help in marketing the products, branding the products. The brand name which they thought was Adi Rakshi, it translated to through the eyes of women. But they didn't have the appropriate branding for this brand, and they didn't have the channel through which they wanted to sell this product.
Such initiatives by the foundation, they don't have the budget to actually hire and onboard the agencies to help them. So this is where we as students stepped in, and since we have had an agency experience, we could actually engage in an ethnographic study where we dwelled in their environment. We acclimatized ourselves in their environment and understood their lives, which is why we could derive insights out of them, and then we could give them actionable solutions. So our creative freedom that we have developed over here was actually used to understand the world better and derive the core problems that they're facing.
So once we understood what's the actual purpose of the bangle solve, like which is not just creating a product, but there are a lot of emotions and empowerment which is going to one bangle, we thought of positioning this brand as a musician archetype, because basically a musician archetype is to make the world a better place to live in by making or enabling people to be more and more happier and self-dependent. So we took the insight from here, and this is what the consumers in the urban areas are looking for. They're looking for more and more products which are pristine, authentic, and also are serving a greater purpose. We weaved a brand story which is mostly talking about things of empowerment, things of caste inclusivity. So we listed the products on an Amazon site. So when Adi Rakshi is being seen on an Amazon site, people connect to the story, connect to the person behind the bangle. So now for the same thing for which they were being paid a meager amount of ₹5 per pair of bangles, they are able to fetch ₹500 and above for the same pair of bangles.
Being immersed almost instantaneously into a rural background was a shock, we no doubt about that. But it also brought out certain aspects of understanding how people actually are in the setting and how do we misinterpret. In a way, it was a very humbling experience. It was an experience which opened our eyes to the fact rural India is also changing as much as urban India. It's just the terms of changes are very different.
There was a lot of dependency on the forest essentials that they were there. So they went to the forest, fetched mushrooms and cooked that food. Then they went to the forest for their grazing for the cows. They were very much conscious about the resources that they used. For instance, the rice that they cooked and the water that was left from that, they used to give to the cows. So there was minimal wastage of resources that we saw over there. And one very interesting fact we saw was that they sent the kids to a private school because their perception was that the government schools did not aid a lot in their learning, and hence they made a collective decision across the households that we'll send them to here, and the money that they'd earned from these initiatives actually supported them to pay the fees of the private school.
We began this journey with a briefing by Professor Arvind Sinha, who was the pioneer of the Rural Immersion project. So learning from a stalwart like him and learning the importance of immersing yourself into a culture was something that we had understood in our classes, but we could see the results firsthand when we were interacting with the people here. I feel that rural immersion is a right step in the life of a marketer, because if you want to understand the target, if you want to understand the consumer, you need to first unlearn a lot of biases that you bring along with yourself and try to be a neutral party into understanding and listening, being a good listener.
We can actually use these knowledge to understand how do we increase the demand for, say, an e-commerce company, increase the demand of products from these areas. For a BFSI, we can engineer services which are centered around the use cases of the rural areas. For HUL or a brand like an FMCG company, we can actually understand that the aspirations of the people are increasing. This is a 360-degree understanding which we got from the immersion program, which we feel will be also scalable and applicable in our future life.